Welcome to MAGA Uncovered, Episode 4, Ron, Episode 4, where we uncover the MAGA propaganda that is not covered by the mainstream media, causing unnecessary division and hatred in America. So our job here is just to try and expose the reality is that things are not really as bad as you might think. I'm Anthony Davis, and this is Ron Filipkowski.
Hello. Good to see you again, Anthony.
Great to see you, Ron. Really kind of thrilled that we get the opportunity to meet like this each week. And I just hope that we never meet in person. That's one of my ambitions is just to continue working remotely. We're live here on the Midas Media Network. You can also subscribe to the audio podcast wherever you get yours, and that'll drop later tonight. Earlier today, former special counsel John Durham was exposed during a committee hearing as a Republican hack. That is still going on as we speak. Only yesterday, a January 6th rioter, Daniel Rodriguez, who the judge called a one-man army of hate, received one of the stiffest sentences so far in the Justice Department's investigation of the Capitol riot. He got 12 and a half years. But, Ron, I think we should start with it's kind of the most incredible thing that could possibly happen to Donald Trump in the lead up, not just to him trying to, retain that or regain that presidency, but also the fact that he's being investigated is that he just totally incriminated himself on television. Tell us about this.
When I watch him talk about the case, as I've done for the last, 6 months, I watch it through the prism of being a criminal defense attorney because I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I've been for 28 years, represent people in court every day. So when I'm watching this, I'm just so taken aback because I'm just flabbergasted that anyone charged with serious federal felonies would be talking about the case. But see, he's in this catch-22 right now where I think he feels like, this is part of him running for president. By him running for president, he can claim that this is all election interference and it's being done for politics. But at the same time, he can't be like most criminal defendants and not talk about it because he's running for president. So he feels like he has to get out there and publicly defend the charges, even though that's the worst possible thing that you could do for a criminal case. What a criminal defense lawyer wants from their client is you want to wait until all the discovery comes in first. And you go over the discovery with your client and you show them what the government has. Then, only then do you then get his side of the story and go over his defenses and what he's going to say. You don't have the defendant out there giving his side of the story publicly before you even get discovery and know what the government has.
But he hasn't got the story straight, right? So
No.
This is part of the problem is he doesn't have a lawyer long enough to make a plan, okay? That the lawyers are dropping off or they quit or he claims to have fired them. I just want to show the clip, really the incriminating clip. There were several in the interview. And I mean, it was a genius interview, I'll be honest. I very rarely credit Fox journalists with anything, but this was a beautiful bit of television where Trump basically admits that he didn't want to give the documents back because he was looking for his pants. Here it is.
Please, could we have it back?
And they
please,
asked for that.
because they have no. We
They
were
did
talking.
ask for it.
No, and
they said,
I gave
"Can you
them
give the
some,
documents back?"
And we were talking.
And then they said they went to DOJ to subpoena you to get them
which
back.
they've never done before.
Right.
And in
but
all
why not
fairness,
just hand them over then?
Because I had boxes. I want to go through the boxes and get all my personal things out. I don't want to hand that over to Nara yet. And I was very busy, as you've sort of seen.
Yeah, but
I've been
according to
very,
the
very
indictment,
busy.
you then tell this aide to move to other locations after telling your lawyers to say you'd fully complied with the subpoena when you hadn't.
But before I send boxes over, I have to take all of my things out. These boxes were interspersed with all sorts of things, golf shirts, clothing, pants, shoes. There were many things. I would say
Iran war
much more, not that I know of, but everything was declassified. And Biden didn't have the right to do that because he wasn't president. Nor did Mike Pence, by the way, have the right to do that because he wasn't president.
All right, I'm not going to...
Everything was declassified, including the pants, by the sounds of it.
What you see at the end is classic Trump, though, where he then starts talking about Biden, Pence. And that's what other interviewers let him get away with, which is when he knows he's pinned down and he's screwed, he will try and change the subject or deflect off. And that was the great thing about Bear's interview, is he was not letting him do that. As you can see, every time he tried to wiggle away, Bear got him right back on track. I mean, he's a pro. I mean, he's a conservative Republican, but he is an old school journalist. He is not like a lot of these other guys at Fox who lobbed Trump the softball interviews. Here's the problem that Trump has had for the last 2 years. He has done nothing but friendly interviews. And I know because I've watched all of them. He's done all these right-wing podcasts, Newsmax, OAN, all these Fox, all these people who just fawn over him, love him, Christian broadcasts, who let him ramble on. And I watch all these. And this was the very first time, and I include the CNN interview in those, this is the very first time that he was pinned down by a serious journalist, and he came out looking just terrible.
What was the interviewer's tactic? You say he's an old school journalist, but is he just sick of the lies? I mean, is this what's happening now at Fox? Is that
I think
they've been caught out and they're just like, okay, come on, let's just enough with this already?
I think Bear had watched his colleagues like Hannity and all these other people on Fox interview him, and I think that it sickened him. And I think it sickened him to show his network just being completely in the tank for this guy and being partially responsible, getting sued, seeing people being fired at the network because of Trump, trying to shill for Trump. And I think that Bear probably had enough. And he went into that interview. He was determined to play it straight and do it the right way. And you see it was a total disaster for Trump.
I mean, I could show clips from that interview all afternoon, right? Because there was the bit about hiring the best people, and then he kind of says, "Well, all of these people you've either fired or they've quit." It was very interesting. What's it going to do for this investigation? What's it going to do? What's Jack Smith going to do with this interview?
Here's the problem for Trump now is that, and I've seen some of his lawyers that are favorable to Trump, that are Trump supporters, talk about this, which it was what their biggest problem is they said, well, I don't know whatever the best defense is going to be based on whatever the discovery and the evidence is, but I know whatever it is, we can't go with that because Trump has already locked himself into a story now on tape. So these tapes are going to be played in his trial. That interview absolutely will be played in his trial. So they don't even need to worry about whether he's going to testify or not, because they've got the goods. They're gonna play his statements on it during the trial. So when the discovery comes in, his lawyers may want to go with one particular defense. The problem is Trump has already taken that away from him with it running his mouth. And so they're just stuck with what he's saying. And what he's saying, by the way, has been about 12 different stories. He keeps changing it. And they're going to play all these different stories in court.
What's the reaction of, the people around Trump? I mean, there's been some incredible articles about this. The Atlantic and Rolling Stone done some really interesting articles about how, his lawyers must have watched that interview with their jaws open. But what's been the reaction, not just from his inner circle, but also from his supporters to that? Because he basically admitted the crime.
The best way you can tell when they hate something is when they go silent.
Yeah.
So during that interview, it was, I'm constantly monitoring their traffic. They just went radio silent. It was like a blank. When he was indicted, it was the same kind of thing for a couple hours. And then they come out, with their talking points, but it's still silent. I mean, the only thing you hear from them is they're grumbling about Brett Baer and how he's a traitor and, how he betrayed them and double crossed them and because he wants DeSantis or something. But there is none of them are saying, oh, that was a great interview for Trump. There's nobody saying that.
The thing that gets me, Ron, is that nothing that comes out of Trump's mouth or the whole Republican platform, all the policies, all of the vitriol, all of the anger, it's all based on nothing. It's all lies. The Russia calling it a hoax. We're listening to John Durham, with being, being interrogated, and he's basically admitting that everything in the Mueller report was true, and he hasn't got a leg to stand on, right? He's been caught out. Adam Schiff's been kind of brilliant at holding him to account. I mean, do you think there's ever going to be a point where the cult of Trump acknowledges that everything that they're screaming about, from transgender athletes, of which there are like 6 in the whole country, the whole platform of hate is just built on lies?
I mean, they have their playbook, and their playbook is, I mean, just to give you the one example, you say there's 6 transgender, but what they will do is they will take those 6 and they will play them constantly, looping them. The Leah Thomas is the one who won the NCAA. I mean, I've seen 5,000 Leah Thomas clips. If a black person commits a crime against a white person in San Francisco, I'm gonna see that on right-wing media 500 times.
Yeah.
So this is what they do. They'll take one incident, an isolated incident, or like the trans person who did one of the mass shooting, and of course they blow that up as, it's the trans hormones that are making them killers. That's their stock and trade, is to take one isolated incident, blow it out of proportion, demagogue it, raise money off it, and get elected.
We weren't going to talk about RFK Jr. today, but let's just mention him very quickly, because this has really kind of heated up, hasn't it? And the idea that he has now got something to say. I was watching a clip of him earlier on doing some talk where he was saying that AIDS was caused by gay people taking poppers. I mean, the guy is bonkers. He is absolutely bonkers. And the media seems to want to kind of run with the idea that he is a serious candidate. He's not a serious person. He is a conspiracy theorist. He's in these groups with, as we know, with not just Joe Rogan, but there's a whole bunch of them who, they love this stuff and they get off on it. And it's very dangerous to maintaining a kind of civil society, let alone the kind of anti-vax stuff. I mean, what's the latest with him, and how does it connect to Elon Musk, who I do want to talk about?
So I've monitored right-wing podcasts and all of that for a long time. And RFK Jr. is somebody who went through a long period of irrelevance where nobody paid any attention to him. He wasn't taken seriously. He sort of disappeared off the map. COVID comes along. He comes out with COVID conspiracies and vax conspiracies. His last name is Kennedy. So he becomes a darling of the right-wing ecosystem. So I've watched over the last 3 years RFK Jr. be a darling of the right. All these podcasts advancing. I've watched them all. I've posted very few because it was always my policy not to ever post vax conspiracies. I just didn't even want to do it. Yeah. So that's why I hardly ever posted RFK. So then I started seeing Bannon, because he would go on Bannon's show, start egging him on to run for president. And this was maybe a year ago it started, and Bannon was constantly, you would make a great candidate. So I know Bannon's whole thing is to create chaos and try and sow division. And so his thought was, well, we'll get him to run against Biden and he'll throw all these vaccine conspiracies out there and just create chaos. So this really was orchestrated by the right, his candidacy, and principally Steve Bannon. And I watched it happen in real time. This candidacy is a complete sham and it's a complete fraud. And I think both myself and the press have tried to ignore him, but I don't think we can anymore. I think we've just got to expose all of the mania from this guy's past, not just the recent stuff, from the past too, that this guy is not a serious person. He's clearly ill.
Let's talk about Elon Musk, because he, I've said before on this show, he's not hiding who he is anymore. He's very much, thrown his political cards on the table. He's a baddie, not a goodie. I always thought he was a goodie. Turns out really bad, really bad. So what's he done now?
Well, the biggest thing that he's doing is to Joe Biden. I mean, and to me, I consider this election interference. They complain about election interference with Trump. Well, the censorship of Trump was not when he was running for president. Okay. It happened after January 6th is when he was censored. There was nobody on Twitter. Twitter was not placing warning labels on his tweets until after he lost the election and he was putting out all the election nonsense, the conspiracies. That was the first time that they started putting warnings on his tweets. What Musk is now doing, though, is well, this is an example, is he's constantly, day after day, ridiculing Joe Biden. He has his community notes attaching rebuttals to each one of Biden's tweets, like fact checking Biden's tweets. And then you see here, when people ridicule Joe Biden, accuse him of being senile, etc., he chimes in with things like this. And if you know how Twitter works, when you reply to somebody's post, every person that's following you sees that person's post. So this might be a rather obscure account, this whole Mars catalog. I don't know, it probably is. But by Musk replying to it, he has now put 143 million eyeballs on that tweet.
Let me read it out.
That's why he's interfering with the election.
Let me read it out for our audio listeners.
Sure.
So it's a small account, a random account that has written, imagine how funny Joe Biden's tweets would be if he wrote them himself and posted without anyone looking them over. And then Elon Musk replies, so epic. I mean, that in itself, because it doesn't even make sense, right? Any leader of the free world should have someone looking over their tweets, right? I mean, I'm sure that Barack Obama, who pretty much led the charge with social media in his administration, didn't write a single of his own tweets without doing it by committee. So that's really the point, isn't it? It doesn't make any sense. It's just so stupid. But the dangerous part of it is that Elon amplifies it.
So if he's going to spend the next 17 months ridiculing everything that Biden posts, posting rebuttals, making fun of him. I mean, Jack Dorsey never did that to Donald Trump. I mean, nobody at Twitter did that to Donald Trump while he's running for president. So yeah, this is a serious problem. This is one man controlling the town square and just not censoring, but actively attacking and ridiculing one of the presidential candidates, who happens to be Joe Biden.
A couple of days ago was Juneteenth, June 19th, and the MAGA reaction to Juneteenth has been significant, to say the least. They do not like it. I'll start with a tweet from Charlie Kirk, and we'll kind of go from there. He says, if Juneteenth was really about emancipation, why not September 22nd, 1862, when Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, or January 1st, 1863, the proclamation took effect, or December 18th, 1865, with the ratification of the 13th Amendment. He says, because it's not about emancipation, which was one of America's great moral achievements. It's about creating a summertime race-based competitor 2 weeks before July 4th, which should be the most unifying civic holiday on the calendar. I mean, man.
The reason why they hate
don't
this,
get it.
The reason why they hate this is he gives it away there, and DeSantis did too, said the same thing.
Yeah.
They want a version of slavery to be presented to the American public that is a myth. And you heard there, and DeSantis said the same thing. Emancipation is a great achievement of the U.S. It's like you've robbed a bank, and the bank robber gave them, give some of the money to charity. So he's a great guy. Yeah. I mean, that's basically what they're saying, is that we did this horrific, terrible crime against humanity, and then we bloodily stopped it, and we should be praised for that.
But they have the same argument for the Confederacy as well.
Yeah. I mean, and so this is why they don't like Juneteenth, is because it's actually like brings that back into the fore, slavery. What they believe, what they want taught, is that this is what the propaganda that they put out was, the idea that slavery existed all over the world, everywhere. All these countries had it, and the U.S. showed the way to end slavery. Slavery ended with us. And it was after we ended slavery that all these other countries around the world saw the light and ended it too, which is the exact opposite of the truth. The U.S. was one of the last civilized, developed countries in the world to outlaw slavery. Almost every country in Europe, except for one or two, had outlawed it decades before. So this is just an attempt to rewrite history, and that's why they hate Juneteenth, is because it's presenting accurate history, which is what they don't like.
the United States was also the last country to ground the Boeing 737 MAX after every other country, despite it killing 346 people. I mean, that always sticks with me. It's like, it's just something about, maybe it's American exceptionalism, this kind of notion that you can make any, you can, by closing your eyes, it's like something didn't happen. Or by squinting, it's like it didn't quite exist.
Well, and they have this also mentality, it feeds into us, where when you criticize America or when you point out bad things about our history, you're anti-American. You hate America, and you want to teach kids to hate America. No, you don't hate America. It's the old Oliver Cromwell thing, when he had his portrait painted and the guy put the wart on his nose in the painting, and he says, oh, no. He left it off. And he said, no, paint the wart.
Yeah.
I want you to show me warts and all, is the famous saying.
Right.
Well, we have to accept who we are as a country. We have to understand both the highs and the lows, the good and the bad, and have an honest accounting and move forward and learn from it. They don't want that. They want a sanitized, mythologized version of who we are.
But let's not also ignore the fact that they are racists.
Yeah.
And that they are white supremacists.
Yeah.
And America, as much as people hate to hear it, especially when a kind of British guy says it, is that America was founded on a lot of racist principles and to maintain the white supremacy, with landowners and the rich, and it's like it's all baked in, and we're still having to deal with it all these years later.
We still are. Yeah. And now it's just coded language, some of it barely coded, but it still exists. It's still a problem, and that's it. It's just got to be. We just got to keep fighting back against it. We got to push back against the propaganda.
I was watching some Mike Flynn stuff earlier today because, he's just, again, a bit like RFK Jr. He's just literally like on another planet. And I tweeted a clip of him basically out loud saying, we need to return this nation to becoming a Christian nation. And again, it's racism, it's white supremacy, and it's an extreme form of Christianity, not your communal garden Christianity. I mean, we're talking about a level of Christian fundamentalism, evangelical Christianity, like levels that are very much in the cult space and not in the regular space. And
let me tell you something.
Extremism, the theme here.
I have heard Michael Flynn a lot talk about religion in the Bible. I've heard Ron DeSantis talk about it. I've heard Donald Trump talk about it.
Yeah.
They all three share one thing in common. They don't know anything about the Bible. They don't know anything about real Christianity. They pretend that they do. They repeat buzzwords. None of these three people, I mean, Flynn grew up in the church, and Flynn grew up with his mom dragging him. His mom was very, very right Catholic, very pro-life. She was big in the pro-life movement in New England. But what they know from religion is kind of rote stuff. It's not a true understanding of Christianity. So they use it to suit their needs. In other words, they used Christianity for politics and to serve their political ends, because the evangelicals are a powerful political movement. They're organized, they donate money, they show up. They're the worker bees of the Republican Party. And so all of these charlatans always want to tap into the evangelicals because it's the best way to mobilize an army. And that's what Flynn is doing.
How is the indoctrination of an extremist religious belief system any different to the indoctrination that they are campaigning against of LGBTQ plus people being allowed to kind of live in society?
It's good versus evil.
Right. I don't, I have children in public school. I don't want my children, we're not religious. We don't have faith. We live in the moment. We're humanists. I don't know what to call us. We don't need anything, we just like Netflix. But the point is, I don't want my children indoctrinated into the church and into Christianity. They can choose to do that when they're older if they want to. Right. And I wouldn't stop them. And that's the whole point of religious freedom. But it's this double standard where it's like we can't have any indoctrination unless it's our indoctrination.
That's exactly right. They want it taught in school. They believe that taking prayer and taking religious instruction out of school is the worst thing that America ever did. Yes, it's indoctrination, but hey, we think it's good indoctrination as far as they're concerned, So yes, it's indoctrination, but it's indoctrination that they like, and they view the other things, the humanist, more secular agenda, as evil, as Satan, as causing harm to society. They think that people who aren't Christians are just lost, and they have no moral compass, and so. Yeah, that's why they want Christianity brought into schools. And if they can't get that, they want charter schools, and they want to use taxpayer funds to pay for religious charter schools. And that's a movement what we're seeing happening now. It's just happened in Oklahoma for the first time. They're challenging constitutional law by having taxpayer funded religious schools, and they're going to take it up to the Supreme Court. That's the next thing.
And DeSantis is steeped in this religious fundamentalism.
Oh, absolutely.
And he is somebody, he's polling second for the primary potentially. I mean, he absolutely makes no effort to hide his kind of Christian fundamentalism and evangelical Christianity. It makes no effort to hide it. And I was watching a video of him quoting the Bible. And it's like, to me, from where I am, I personally don't believe the Bible is a thing. Like, to me, it doesn't mean anything, because to me, it's not true. But it's not going to stop me. It's not going to stop me telling somebody else that it's not true. But to run a government using these principles, it's just very controversial, isn't it?
Yeah, and he'll argue the Establishment Clause with you. Yeah. I mean, the Establishment Clause in the First Amendment, the government can't establish a religion. And, they have a very, very narrow interpretation of what that means. Yeah. What that means to them is that you just can't have an official state religion. Yeah. But every other religious entity in government life is acceptable to them. So, that's not the way the Supreme Court has interpreted that clause in the past, but they are hoping that this Supreme Court, which is much more conservative, will see it differently. And so that's definitely an issue, is they're going to seek to restrict the Establishment Clause and have it interpreted very narrowly by this Supreme Court.
We always end up talking about the evaporating separation of church and state. It's like that's what you're voting for now with MAGA Republicans. You're voting for that kind of Mike Flynn Christian movement, right?
Yeah, and make no mistake, like the abortion decision is part of that too. Yeah. So much of the anti-abortion movement relates back to Christianity, and their biblical beliefs. Although it's not in the Bible, this is what they believe is part of their teachings, part of their Christian beliefs. So it weaves its way into other decisions as well, like abortion.
Let's talk about Hunter Biden. Not his laptop this time. This time it's a firearm and it's 2 tax charges. The investigation is complete. He has agreed a plea deal. And I mean, these are things that would normally, like, nobody would ever get charged with these types of things. But I suppose they want to draw a line under the whole Hunter Biden thing, right? Tell us about the MAGA reaction to this plea agreement.
Yeah, well, of course, the reaction is to lie. I mean, the reaction is Joe Biden is behind this. Joe Biden is prosecuting his political opponent and set up a sweetheart deal for his son. Of course, when you confront them with the facts that the prosecutor who filed these charges, who brought these charges, who made the plea deal, was appointed by Donald Trump, is a Donald Trump prosecutor who was held over by Joe Biden. And I think that Merrick Garland wanted a Trump-appointed prosecutor, a Republican, to handle this particular matter. So it worked out quite well. But with no evidence whatsoever, they claim that Biden was behind this plea deal. Like, Biden is the one who called up this prosecutor and said, "Give my son a break." No, the reality is what he was prosecuted for is because he was on video using drugs, and there's also a receipt for him buying a firearm on the laptop. So they took those two things together and made a criminal case out of that. Now, that would never happen. I deal with these cases every day where my clients' phones get seized, their cell phones get seized, their laptops. Police go through them with a warrant. They find all kinds of past bad things that they did on there. They never get charged with things that are on their phone or their laptop from the past. Like, somebody could be smoking weed in a video on their phone. You're not going to get prosecuted for that. It's only if you get caught with the weed, right? So yes, they prosecuted him for something that normally somebody would never get prosecuted for under these circumstances. But I believe that probably the Justice Department felt like they had to prosecute him for something, or else, you know, these people are not going to leave it alone. But remember, I think I said in our very first show, or I said it on another show, that you know, I thought when Joe Biden first came out and gave his initial statement about all of this months ago, he said, I love my son, and my son did nothing wrong. And I said at the time that was a mistake, that Joe Biden should not say my son did nothing wrong. I just think he wasn't aware of what was on the laptop. I've seen the laptop. I've seen everything that's on there. He did plenty wrong. But what he did wrong was in the past, you know, historical things, not anything he got caught doing, is what I'm saying. So no, Joe should be very careful and not talk about this. I mean, he really shouldn't.
It's a natural reaction.
I love my son,
though, isn't it? That's the thing. You always, it's a natural reaction as a parent.
Natural
to just want to protect your kids.
Yep.
Although,
but he's president, so he's got to be careful.
He has. You know? Although I was going to say that I don't think that if the same situation was Donald Trump, I don't think he would have that natural parental reaction to protect his kids. I think he'd just throw them down and be like,
Donald Jr. Who?
Yeah,
Eric
exactly.
who?
Yeah, Bannon.
Who's that?
You mentioned Merrick Garland. Something that was a very interesting article in the New York Times that came out this week about the fact that it's taken a year. There was a year delay for Merrick Garland to kind of start this investigation. Just tell us about that, because it's kind of important, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I was wrong here. I was wrong here because I've been a Garland defender. I defended him interview after interview, just because I have experience in the criminal justice system and I know that investigations can take a long time. And the reason why I defended him was because I thought that the Justice Department was doing that investigation and was working very hard behind the scenes. This is what I believed was going on.
I did not, by the way. I'm like the opposite.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Most people agreed with you. And I was in the very much minority defending Garland, but I did. I defended him on Twitter, but I was wrong. You were right. Yeah, it appears that that was not what was happening. What was happening was they were trying to do an investigation, but Garland was putting the kibosh on it. And it was only the work of the January 6th committee, which was so thorough, that basically shamed Garland and forced him to appoint a special prosecutor. So in the end, where I thought, oh, Garland's going to be vindicated in the end and he's going to be the hero, doesn't appear to be the case. It looks like the heroes are going to be the January 6th committee members and Jack Smith.
So let's ask why for a second. Why would Merrick Garland not want to go after a former president? Is it that there is a built-in presidential immunity, a cultural immunity, whereas you can't really touch the president because it sets a bit of a precedent? And is it one of those situations?
Yeah, Merrick Garland is not a political person. He's not politically savvy. He's not ruthless. He's not particularly tough. It's kind of my problem with Mayorkas, to be honest with you. You know, we're getting killed politically on the border issue. And part of the reason is because Mayorkas is pretty weak at defending himself and at defending the policy. And it's the same thing with Garland. You know, when Garland testifies in front of Congress, I'm not impressed. You know, he doesn't do he's not forceful. He's not aggressive. He acts like a judge. Yeah. He acts like a judge, not an attorney general. And I believe he would have been much better on the Supreme Court, and his temperament and his attitude is much more suited to be a Supreme Court justice than an attorney general. Do I think he should be fired? No, I don't think he should be fired, because I think he's done a good job in many other areas. But in this one, clearly he dropped the ball. And yes, I think it's an institutional thing. It's a thing of it's the gravity of prosecuting a former president, because here's the thing. You can't just prosecute Donald Trump. You pretty much have to prosecute about a dozen other people. So it's basically like decapitating the Republican Party. It's taking the leadership of this entire political movement out. And I think that he was very, very hesitant to do that. And but you have to go where the law and the facts take you.
But it's so blind, Ron. I mean, it's like, it was Juneteenth when this news came out. It's like it's so blind. If you're white and wealthy and rich, then you're like, yeah, well, shouldn't really prosecute. But if you're of a minority group and, if you're black and your friends are like constantly being pulled over by the police and given a hard time, or if you've got family who are doing prison time for no reason, for like minor weed crimes or something, because the justice system has unfairly, is stacked against you socially and culturally and historically, then it just makes Garland out to be someone who is so blind to America's history and how white people, yet again, rich white people, get away with it time and time again.
I think that now appears to be the way the history of this is going to be written. I think it's sad. I think he's a nice man, but yeah, I think you're right. And I've changed my view on that. I admit that I was wrong.
It's a very good thing that you're able to say that out loud, because a lot of people would not be able to do that. Let's lighten the mood a little bit with that. There was that moment of Donald Trump after he was arraigned, and then he goes on like a tour of McDonald's and cafes, and he shows up at this.
Yes.
Is it Cafe Versailles in Florida? Have you been there?
Very famous.
Yes. And he promised that he was going to like buy everybody lunch or something. It was, a typical kind of Trump photo op. And of course, the Secret Service had been there earlier and they'd been staking it out, and they made it look like an impromptu stop, but it wasn't. Tell us the story.
So this story really starts in East Brunswick, Ohio, with the train derailment. Right. And, Trump and his team decided to do really a publicity stunt, and to take advantage of what those people were going through and he wanted to fly up there, and he wanted to get in front of all the cameras that he was up there to help the people in East Brunswick. So as part of that, Jason Miller arranged for him to go to a McDonald's, and to walk in and Big Macs for everybody. And he got so much media out of that, free media, local media, they really focused on the Big Mac excursion. And he got so much positive press from that. And so this is now their thing, that everywhere Trump goes now, every rally, every appearance, Jason sets up a restaurant or a diner where he can be the common man and meet the people. We see him do it with pizza places, fast food joints, diners. This is their new thing. And so he goes in, takes a few photos, food for everybody, I'm buying. And then they leave. So they did this at Versailles, but they got busted because a reporter checked, and said, did anybody pay? I didn't see anybody get any food. No, they didn't. And then the Trump campaign went silent on it for 2 days, which is definitely not like them. They are very rapid reacting specialists. And normally, even if something is true, they're going to be out there denying it immediately. And this they did not deny. They finally somewhat denied it 3 or 4 days later. It was kind of a half-hearted, oh no, that's not true. But that's not a typical Trump campaign denial. So yeah, I mean it's this is something that we really have to pay attention to, are these little diner outings and McDonald's outings, because if you catch him on things like this fake hypocrisy, it really does undermine his whole message that he cares about the average person.
I would argue that the only thing that Donald Trump has in common with the average person is like calorific fast food. I mean, it's like the only thing that is of common ground. He loves a burger. He loves his McDonald's. He was once famously quoted, I'll never forget this, as saying that the reason he liked to eat McDonald's all the time is at least you know where it's come from.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Couple funny things there. I posted a picture. Jason Miller, by the way, was leaving Versailles with a couple of bags full of Cuban sandwiches. Okay, right. So Jason Miller was leaving there with sandwiches for him and Trump. Okay, even though nobody else got anything, they got free stuff. So that's one thing. And the second thing is when all these, Trump loves McDonald's stuff, I always thought that was exaggerated by the media, and it was kind of like a thing that everybody liked to make fun of him about. But then, I've heard Guilfoyle talk about it. I've heard his kids talk about it. This is a real thing.
Yeah, loves it.
He really does eat all this garbage all the time.
You know that feeling you get after you've eaten fast food where
Terrible.
you just like that kind of regret? He must like live in that space the whole time. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, just like living in his regret.
Well, you know who else? DeSantis too is a fast food junkie. He's a chicken sandwich junkie. He's a connoisseur. So I just read the story about when Popeye's Chicken came out with their chicken sandwich. The first day they debuted it, he sent aides running all around Tallahassee area to the different Popeyes trying to find some chicken sandwiches because they were all sold out. So that appears to be a common trait among right-wing politicians these days is an addiction to fast food.
Let's talk about the man in the hat. I always call him that. John Eastman. This is the man in the hat. This is the Trump lawyer who famously took the stage at the January 6th rally the day of the riot, but before Trump took to the stage, and he basically was like the warm-up man, gave a whole load of political propaganda with as the kind of legal representative, and he's finally getting his comeuppance. I actually have a little clip of this, so maybe I'll play the clip and then we can talk about it.
Deter them. They went ahead and filed a notice of disciplinary charges in January. And now the trial begins on Tuesday, and it's a full-fledged trial. I mean, they're pulling out all the stops. It's really extraordinary the amount of taxpayer resources that are going in to trying to disprove claims that I made, or more importantly, that I had no basis whatsoever for making claims that election officials violated the law. Acted unconstitutionally in the conduct of the election. And so that's what the trial will be, and the bar is calling me as its first witness on Tuesday, and the judge has ordered that it's going to be live streamed, so it'll be quite a media circus, I suspect.
I hope it'll be a circus, and I wonder if he'll be wearing his hat, because he was sans hat just then. I mean, look, this is a guy who got up and lied to everybody about the election being stolen. And in addition to Donald Trump saying, let's go to the Capitol and I'll go with you, was one of the instigators for the insurrection.
Yeah. So let me give you some background and let me give you some breaking news that's happening today on this.
Yeah.
First, the background. So when the election lawsuits all failed and they realized that none of the Rudy stuff was going to work. Okay. So this was mid-December. Barr quits. Esper's fired. Everything is starting to come into place to cook up something on January 6th to try and block the certification of the election. And there were two legal camps that were pushing Trump in two different directions. One camp was the Rudy, Sidney Powell, Michael Flynn, Patrick Byrne camp. They were pushing a plan to where they would invoke the Insurrection Act, declare martial law, seize voting machines, and rerun the election in 6 states. That was their plan. They got the hearing in the White House. If you remember from the J6 hearings, the White House counsels all were screaming at him, threatening to resign. They got in Flynn's face. They were shouting at each other. That's what that was about. The competing plan at the same time was being pitched by John Eastman. And that was a more palatable plan, let's say, because it didn't involve invoking martial law. His plan was just arguing Penn should decertify, send it back to the states, and the state legislatures should vote on sending an alternate slate of electors, the fake electors scheme, right? And that's the one that Trump decided to go with. The reason why Eastman is in trouble right now, and here's the breaking news. The breaking news is, right now, as we're doing this show, Mike Pence's lawyer is testifying against John Eastman, and he is testifying in his disbarment. And the reason why they're calling him as a witness is they found an email that Pence's lawyer had sent to Eastman back when this was all going down, saying, your legal theories, I've done the research, I've talked to judges, I've talked to everyone. This has no basis in law and fact. You are making shit up. This is not legit. This is not a legitimate legal argument. There's no basis for this argument. And yet Eastman continued to push it to Trump because he was telling Trump what Trump wanted to hear. And so this is why Eastman is being disbarred, because a lawyer cannot bring. I've had clients who tell me, just file a motion, just file something. And I say, no, I'm not going to do that. I have to have a good faith legal basis to file this motion. I'm not going to do it just because you want me to. And this is why Eastman's in trouble, is that he came up with an idea. It wasn't even Trump that came up with this idea. He came up with the idea and pitched it to Trump, and Trump bought it.
But
and
didn't
so
he also write it down?
Lawyers can't do that.
I mean, this is the other thing. It was he like wrote it down. It was like it was written as a plan.
Yeah,
it's like it's a document. It's like, this is how we overturn the election. I mean, it's not even. I mean, this is the thing about the coup, and I really enjoy calling it a coup because, you know, we tend to associate coups with shithole countries, right? But, you know, this is America, and there was a coup in plain sight. And Eastman, I mean, the other one that you describe, I refer to it as the Overstock coup, right? Because of course it was the former boss of Overstock, that
Patrick Byrne,
Byrne, who you mentioned. And there's a very good PBS documentary about the Patrick Byrne and Mike Flynn aspect of this. I don't know if you've seen the documentary, but it basically covers they had a plane and they would fly all over the country trying to convince people to kind of go along with the plan.
I lived this. I don't need to see a documentary. I lived it in real time.
Yeah, it's a very well made documentary for us mortals, you know, who don't live in the same space as you. But my point is that none of this happened by accident. Like, all of these plans to overturn the election and to, you know, a lot of it hinged on Mike Pence, and Didn't he take advice from who was that judge that he took advice from?
Judge Ludig. In fact,
that's right.
He was mentioned by Mike Pence's lawyer in this email to John Eastman. He said, I talked to Judge Ludig. He cited all the different people that he talked to, and they all say you're nuts. You're crazy. You have nothing. You have no argument here. And so, so yes, both plans depended on Pence not certifying the election either way, but different plans had different people in place to move forward from after that was done. But it all hinged on Pence decertifying. And that's why a lot of J6 conspiracy theorists believe that the insurrection was a setup by the FBI, because what they're saying is that the rioters ruined their plan. That their plan was in place and they believed it was going to work, but once it worked by having so many people in the House vote to send it back to the states and refuse to go along with the electoral slates. So that's why Pence had to. They believe that the insurrection caused a lot of House members and senators to change their mind and to support certification.
And what you're describing is what Peter Navarro talks about, right? Peter Navarro, again, one of Trump's aides. I can't remember what job Peter Navarro had. He was given
trade advisor.
Trade, that's right.
Yeah.
He would go on MSNBC with like Ari Melber and explain and expose this whole thing after January 6th as if it was a legitimate idea. Like, he was convinced that it wasn't illegal and that this is what they planned to do because they knew the election had been stolen. It's like he was totally brainwashed and was happy to keep going on TV and exposing the plan.
Yeah, well, I was the one who posted the first Green Bay sweep Peter Navarro clip the first time he said it on Bannon Show.
Right.
And it kind of made national news. And then Ari picked up on it, invited him on the show, and he went on and he made a fool of himself.
And
Ari
did
a tremendous job with his questioning of him and pinning him down.
Yeah,
but yeah, their plan was, it's kind of like a Bannon Navarro plan, was to, after Pence refused to certify or wouldn't certify, it would then go back to these 6 state legislatures, and the state legislatures would vote on who won that state. In other words, Flynn's plan was to rerun the election in those states and to have USAID, which is a government agency, and the military oversee that election. Their plan, the Green Bay sweep, Navarro, Eastman plan, was cleaner. It was, we're going to send it back, and the legislature is just going to use their plenary power to say, we believe that Donald Trump won Pennsylvania. Because those so many states that Biden won, like Arizona and Pennsylvania, had Republican majorities in their state legislatures. Georgia too.
Give me the name of that group again that Mike Flynn wanted to bring into over,
USAID.
Right. So that is an organization that is designed for America to go and support nations that have questionable elections, right? Where we go to those other countries and we police their elections for them to guarantee and support democracy. And Flynn wanted to use them in America.
You've hit on something very smart there, Anthony. Very smart. Very few people have ever picked up on this part of the plan, and you're absolutely correct. Their whole plan was, yes, that they were going to use the agency USAID, which is what the agency where we help third world countries, basically, that have problems in their country having free and fair elections. We help monitor and supervise their elections. He was going to use that agency here in the United States for the first time to run elections. And the other part of this plan, by the way, was that Trump had appointed as the new USAID director a crony of his, a personal injury lawyer, to be in charge of it 6 months before the election. So these plans were being put in place to overturn this election months before the election even happened. And that was one way. And these are things that have been not very widely reported or talked about at all. When I talked to the J6 committee and they interviewed me, I brought this up with them and informed them about this. This was part of their plan. But I don't think they ever really got into that part of it, because they sort of, the way their investigation stopped with Pence and the fake elector plot, and it kind of ended there. They didn't game it out to what these guys' plan was past that. But that was the plan.
There were so many plans in place, and yet there was no plan for the National Guard to be on standby. That's the irony of all of this, right? The National Guard being right there could have prevented this riot and the kind of the physical version of this. Because to me, there's very much two January 6s, right? There's the one happening inside the building with the fake electors and everything hinging on Mike Pence. And then you've got this external kind of desperate final last act, which is, right, we'll just send the mob in and we'll just go and grab this by the throat.
One important point to make here is that I absolutely believe that many of these people that were behind these plots did not want these people to storm the Capitol.
Yeah.
There were some that did. There were some that did. There were some that wanted violence and disruption, but there were many who did not, because they believed that their plan was going to work without that. And they believe that when these idiots and these morons stormed the Capitol, it ruined their plan. They believe it did more harm than good.
We MeidasTouch made this amazing 5-minute video. Search for it after you've watched us here today. It's called A Coup in Plain Sight. Search for it on YouTube and watch A Coup in Plain Sight. It's a 5-minute chronological video of what happened the day before and the lead up to January 6th. If you haven't seen it, it's when you put it all in order. Because, up until then, it was all scattergun, this happened and there was a bit of this. But when you look at how the plan was formulated and how it played out, it really kind of brings clarity to what was quite a complex and confusing couple of days. Let's talk about Donald Trump and his gladiator games. This is a very kind of another one of these kind of in the shadows videos where Trump likes to kind of pretend that he's some kind of evil dictator. Why do you think he likes to be filmed in the dark? Is it? I don't know. I can't. Don't answer that. We'll just.
I don't know.
Just throw it out there. Just you've got all access to all the money in the world. Like, put some lights on in the room. I don't get it. Anyway, tell us about the Gladiator Games.
Well, I think it's kind of like his answer to Juneteenth, because he kind of I think he put it out on Juneteenth, which is that what he wants to do is he wants to basically be Emperor Nero. He wants to, Nero was famous for bread and circuses to distract the mob. The way, if people are unhappy in the country or in the empire and they're dissatisfied with their lives or their food or whatever, you have bread and circuses, you have game, you distract them, you divert their attention. So what Trump proposed in one of these insane policy videos, and I've said that the press needs to report on these and pick these up. The press did not report this video at all, even though it's completely insane. They had just ignored it, which is dumb. But he said, as president, what he was going to, in 2025, he's going to have one solid year of festivals and games.
Yeah, I have the clip. Shall I show the clip?
Go ahead.
Because, there's no point in you impersonating Donald Trump when
Sure.
he does a great impression of himself. Here it is.
3 years from now, the United States will celebrate the biggest and most important milestone in our country's history. 250 years of American independence. What a great country. And we have to keep it that way. But that's why, as a nation, we should be preparing for a most spectacular birthday party. We want to make it the best of all time. Here is my plan to give America's founding in 1776 the incredible anniversary it truly deserves. On day one, I will convene a White House task force called Salute to America 250. It will be responsible for coordinating with state and local governments to ensure not just one day of celebration, but an entire year of festivities across the nation, starting on Memorial Day 2025 and continuing through July 4th, 2026.
Do you think trans athletes will be allowed to take part, Ron?
Here's what we know. Here's what we know. This is going to look, these are going to be Trump games. These are not going to be, these are not going to be America. This is going to be all Trump, all about Trump. This is his desire to have military parades and, where he's the hero, he's the conquering hero. So yeah, he basically, this is just nonsense. This is just fantasy. This is just insanity. And I again, for the life of me, I don't understand why the press doesn't pick up on these things, because I think the average American low information voter who doesn't really pay attention to elections needs to see these things, needs to see him talking about electing principals of schools, because he's saying some really, building 10 new freedom cities. He says some really wild stuff in these videos, and they're just not reported. But I do like the fact that Bret Baier brought up one of a couple things in these policy videos and asked him about it, and he couldn't even defend them because he didn't even understand his own policy. He was talking about the death penalty for drug dealers, and Bret Baier said, well, wait a minute, some of the people that you pardoned would have been executed under your own policy plan, and he didn't even understand it because he doesn't write these things. They're being written for him. So if the press asks him about these things, he doesn't even know anything about them.
He didn't know the name of the woman that he'd pardoned. That was the thing that kind of struck with me.
Right.
And then the interviewer goes, well, she would be executed under your plan. He goes,
what plan?
Yeah, right. And then he goes, well, starting from now. I mean, did America elect America's dumbest man? I mean, is that what happened? And you and I are having to debrief on it 5 years later.
He's the Elmer Gantry. He's a con man. He's a huckster. He's a charlatan. He's just constantly trying to throw shiny objects out there and hoping people will buy them.
Finally, I want to talk about, because we have to finish in a few minutes, I want to talk about the House Oversight Committee's investigation into President Joe Biden and his son's alleged bribery. Well, Giuliani had a whistleblower who apparently has died. And there's apparently audio recordings of Biden accepting a bribe, except Comer and Grassley and the FBI, they haven't got the tapes. They thought they had the tapes, but they can't get the tapes. Tell us about this.
Lev Parnas, by the way, wrote the best thread on this. It's very short on Twitter. If anybody has a chance to go read it, Lev knows some of the, Lev was Rudy's wingman there for a while till he got prosecuted.
This is my Lev Parnas impression, by the way.
Yeah. Lev's hilarious.
In every photo with him and Trump and heads of state, always the thumbs. Love it.
Yeah, so Lev's, he's like Michael Cohen. He's had a complete 180, and he's on the right side of things now. So, but I mean, he'll tell you this is all nonsense. I mean, Rudy's never even talked to these people. Some of these people have been dead for years that they're bringing up. They're mentioning these tapes that they supposedly have. No one's ever heard the tapes. We don't even know if the guy who claims to have recorded the tapes, we don't even know if he even exists. They don't know anything. They're just throwing garbage out there. They like these fantastical, wild allegations in these background FBI reports that they can throw out there and get people all excited. And then when you pin them down and say, all right, well, let's show me the tapes. Let us hear them. Call the witnesses. Oh, we're working on it. We're trying to track them down. We're trying to find them.
It's all distraction. I've got the clip of Comer being interviewed about this, where he basically admits that there's no evidence. This is just an investigation in search of a crime.
With respect to the tapes, look, it mentioned in the FBI form that the oligarch had 17 tapes of Biden, 2 with Joe Biden, accepting the bribe, that he used that as an insurance policy.
This oligarch was a high-ranking member or owner of Burisma?
Yes, that is exactly right. So
have you had any contact with him?
Unfortunately, nobody's had any contact with him for the last 3 years. The MSNBC makes fun of me when I said that there are a lot of people that were involved in the Biden shenanigans that are currently missing. But with respect to this oligarch, we think we know where he is. He just hasn't been seen in public in a long time.
So I'm just looking for the oligarch.
It's just these guys, they're such clowns. And see, the plan was to roll all of this out in 2020, right before the election, when you didn't really have time to rebut any of this stuff. But that got kiboshed. And so now they're rolling it out now. But the problem is it's too early. Something like this, you have to spring a week before the election for it to work. But now there's too much time for all of this stuff to get debunked. That's their problem.
Okay. Listen, we have to finish, but, what a pleasure. Always like hanging out with you for an hour on a Wednesday, and let's do it again next week. Ron Filipkowski, thank you so much.
Sounds great. See you next week.
I'm Anthony Davis. Follow us both on Twitter. Catch me every day on the 5 Minute News podcast, and on Sunday hosting the weekend show here with MeidasTouch.